Now is the time to install VMware ESXi as a hypervisor in our VMware Workstation. As you can see, I just installed the virtual machine to install VMware Workstation for you. And I have my VMware Workstation which is installed on my PC. Actually, I don't want to remove it and reinstall it again. I just installed the virtual machine and I showed you how we can install VMware Workstation. That means we don't need this virtual machine anymore. And we'll right click and we'll say delete from disk. That's okay. So this is the virtual machine and these are my labs here. So first of all, we should create a folder here and we'll say vSphere 7, something like this. I want to install all the virtual machine for my vSphere course in this folder. So we'll go to home and we want to actually create a virtual machine that we can install our ESXi hypervisor. So simply we'll click on create a new virtual machine. You can select custom or typical. I prefer custom and next. And here we'll specify the hardware compatibility. The hardware compatibility is going to be Workstation 15, which is the latest version that we have. So we'll click on next. And here you should use your local CD drive. You can simply browse the ISO file. So this is VMware Vmvisor installer, which is ESXi. So select it and we'll say open and next. And here it tells you select a guest operating system. We'll click on ESXi and as you can see we don't have version 7 yet. So obviously we'll use Workstation 15.5. The next version we're going to have VMware ESXi 7. So we'll click the latest version which is 6.x and next. And here it tells you the location for storing the VMware ESXi file. So I'm going to browse here to my SSD drive and here in VM location just create a folder. Try to use my method actually to have all your virtual machine for your course in the same folder. So we'll say vSphere 7 and again we'll say ESXi 01. That means we want to install ESXi 01 on VMware vSphere 7 folder here. And okay, and here we'll say 7. That's great. And next. And this is the processor configuration. We'll leave it to default. And next. And this is the memory. So in this first ESXi, we want to deploy or install our vCenter server. And actually we'll install a virtual machine. So it's clear if we want to actually use the tiny version of VMware vCenter server, we need 12 GB and at least 2 virtual CPUs. So that's okay. We'll say 12 GB only for vCenter server. And this ESXi itself, it needs 4 GB for installation. That means we should say 16 GB. And then if you need to install a virtual machine, which is something like Windows 7 or Windows 10, at least you will need 2 GB. So again, we'll say, 18. 18 GB only for the first one. And then for ESXi 2, only we will reserve 6 GB, which is going to be only will install the ESXi and only one virtual machine for ESXi 2. This is the first one. So that's great. We'll say next. And here the virtual network, we'll leave it default. Later on, we should change it and we'll say next. And again, next. This is the IO control, which is default. And this is SCSI, which is recommended. The first one is great for you. And next. And here it tells you you should create a virtual disk. This is actually the virtual disk that we want to install our ESXi hypervisor. We should have at least 2 media, which is our virtual disks. The first one is for installing our ESXi, and the second one for deploying or installing virtual machine in our production network. So in your production environment, you should install it on your USB drive or SD disk, which we talked about it earlier in previous lessons, or something like your local disk. If you want to install it for local disk, you should have at least 32 GB for local disk. Let's imagine that you have HPE server. You should have two minimum disks, I mean something like 146, and we should make them as a RAID 0. That means in RAID 0, each disk is mirror the second one. That's the great thing that you can do in your production environment. But don't worry if your ESXi crash or has a problem to boot. You can easily again install the new version and just actually reconfigure it again. It is not actually hard to configure it again. I will show you how you can configure very easy. But in case of redundancy or get rid of disaster, it's better that you deploy your ESXi on RAID 0 in your production environment. Here in our lab, we just install it in a single disk, but don't forget in your production environment, you can install it on your flash disk or SD card, or if you want to do a best practice, you should install it on RAID 0. We'll say create. So here we'll say, for example, 10 GB. So in your production environment, if you use SD card or USB disk, it's better that you have the new one with the 32 gig free space. So we'll say next, and this is the disk type, the information and the name, and next, customize hardware. So here we can see the information. So first of all, we'll double check the ISO file, and we have checked this box, connect at power on, and here we'll just use VMnet 0 as it shows here in our diagram. All the materials or operating system are going to install on VMnet 0. So that's great. And the IP address is going to be 10.1. So we'll say close and finish. First of all, we should drag it and put it here in vSphere 7 folder. So of course here you can double check your settings here, and here is the options. You can change the location and the name. And I'm going to use the maximum size here. So now we have welcome to VMware ESXi installation. We should press enter to continue. And here it tells you you should accept and continue by press F11. And here we have VMware virtual disk, which is 10 GB for only installing our ESXi. Later on, we're going to add another disk for deploying our vCenter server or other virtual machine. And here it tells you if you use existing VMFS -3, which is the older version of VMDK files or VMware VMDisk file, it will upgrade automatically to the VMFS file. So we'll click on enter to continue. And here it tells you the keyboard layout and the password. So we'll type the password. It's recommended that you use complexity password, and again we'll press enter to continue. And here it tells you you should press F11 to install the ESXi. And here we have the warning. This disk will be repartitioned. That's great. We'll press F11. And as you can see, the installation is started. So the installation takes about 2 or 3 minutes. So now here it tells you you should enter to boot your ESXi. So in the meanwhile, I'll hold Ctrl Alt actually to have my cursor, and here we'll click on exit full screen to see the process of installing ESXi. So now as you can see, we successfully installed the first ESXi. So in your lab, you should install the second one.